What do you think is an essential skill to help somebody speak, sound, look, and perhaps even act like a leader?
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been talking about coaching, so I won't mention coaching because
Mhm.
that's, obvious. That is
Mhm.
I'm a big proponent of that. But I would say the idea of presenting yourself professionally as a leader
Mhm.
is incredibly important in our world right now, especially as uh, companies, organizations do look and see how people are presenting themselves
Mhm.
in the public forum, whether it's social media or other places. And so I think for a person who wants to be a true leader is being selective about, what it is that you say publicly, what it is that you are, how you're representing yourself and your brand, especially online. I think that's very important.
What do you think is the essential skill to speak, sound, look, and perhaps even act like a leader?
I'll answer that through the eyes of for the importance of vulnerability. And I'll say this as I think leaders should be humbly confident. In other words, to be able to share vulnerability, to leave the ego at the door, to not worry about some of the things of being right all the time. It's not
Mhm.
about that. It's about understanding your team. So vulnerability, understanding your team, and again, humbly confident. Uh,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of leaders, especially newer leaders, that get really wrapped up in the fact that they have to know everything.
Mhm.
They are the boss. Um, and at the end of the day, their job is to develop a team, develop that trust, and being vulnerable
Mhm.
is not easy.
Karen, what do you think is an essential skill so that somebody can speak, sound, look, and even act like a leader?
High emotional IQ,
Mhm.
without a question,
Mhm.
which means a whole lot of different things. But nobody's perfect. All of
Mhm.
us have blind spots, but those with a high emotional IQ know the areas in which they are struggling, and they surround themselves with other people who are good at their weakness and who have a comfort level to have a dialogue like this, Lynda, where it's not scripted. We can talk. We can disagree. The dialogue is welcomed, and opinions are honored.
What do you think is the essential skill? It could be something you mentioned already, but the essential skill for somebody to speak, sound, look, or act like a leader?
I think it's a great question. I think leadership is situational.
Mhm.
And I think it is important to understand the situation I'm walking into as a leader. And so sometimes a leader is walking into a situation where what is required is to build confidence and to give security, et cetera. So just say there's a crisis.
Mhm.
Now, how a leader communicates that is with empathy and also conveying confidence that they know what's going to happen, that they're in charge, et cetera. At other times as well, what a leader needs to convey is something a little bit different. And maybe it has to be a little firmer, a little direct. So I think what's important for me is understanding the context and then having a knowledge and the skills of how to use that context and how to show up.
What do you think is an essential skill in order to speak, sound, and look like a leader?
Well, I appreciate you providing me this question in advance, Lynda, and I will say I've been thinking about it. Ironically, I was doing a yoga practice just a few days ago, and the instructor said that to release your resistance to softening.
Hmm.
And I thought that is an amazing tool for a leader to soften, because so often we think we have to force, to push, to drive. But when we step back and pause and release that forcing, that anxiety, the stress that we put on ourselves to perform, is when the magic really happens. And that's truly when you can create a calming leadership presence for everyone who is around you. So I would say that softening, that pause, will allow you to listen better, to create more thoughtful responses, make better decisions, and really build that trust and confidence among your team.
What do you think is an essential skill to speak, sound, and look, and even act like a leader?
Oh gosh, one?
One. What do you think is the most? And there are so many.
There are so many. Being your authentic self.
Mm. Okay.
Sometimes I think that people think that, I can get this coach and sound like them, or I can, borrow a speaker's style and sound like them. I'll never forget. I heard this teacher one time and I said, oh my goodness, that's it. That's it. I'm going to sound just like that, because I love the way she graced the stage. I love the way she just talked, and she was just so calm, and it was so beautiful. It was just like, yes, this is it. This is the way I'm going to start doing from now on. Well, obviously that didn't work, but I had to tap into my authentic voice. I had to allow space and honor the gifts that I have to be animated, and my facial expressions always talk for me, and whatever it is, or who I am, I embraced that and I sharpened it, because I think what people may sometimes believe is because you accept yourself for who you are, that means that you don't need to become better or develop.
Now, here's my question that I like to ask all my guests, because this is, and what I focus on is how to speak, sound, and look like a leader.
Yeah.
What do you think is an essential skill, especially related to CEOs and business development, to help them speak, sound, and look like a leader?
Ooh, so a lot of things come to mind, actually, Lynda. One thing I would maybe center on a little bit is understanding, who are your best referral partners and who are your best centers of influence. And I say that because I think a lot of communication is involved in there, and that essential skill to speak, to build relationships, and to be a leader. And so when I think of your best referral partners, when I think of focusing on your best centers of influence, I think of building really deep relationships with those folks and communicating with them and talking to them often. And most importantly, showing them value. Because if you can show those folks value, and you're introducing them to people, you're giving them thought leadership, you're going on LinkedIn and liking and reposting their stuff, that's going to come back to you. And I think the leadership part of that is then taking that and coaching your team on how they can do the same. So it's kind of lead by example, but then it's also, get in there and teach your executive team how to do these things, because it's a skill set that, everybody definitely on the executive team needs to have. And it really does focus around good communication and building trust and building relationships with these key people.
There's a question I ask everybody who I interview on this series, and that is, what is an essential skill to you that would help a leader, to help somebody speak, sound, look, or act like a leader?
Yes, I think coming back to what I was talking about before, it is providing that inspirational challenge, right, to the team, to be able to really say, like, we're going to go somewhere that's going to be difficult. I don't know how we're going to get there, right? To be able to really get everybody on board with that. I think, to be that inspirational challenger for the team, but underneath is that, the EQ, if you like, the emotional intelligence, is to also provide an environment of support.
Mhm.
We can get those two things. I think those are essential qualities that really help a leader be able to take their team to where they need to go.
Great. That sounds wonderful. If you can say there's one essential skill you need to speak, sound, and look like a leader, what would that be?
One essential skill that I would recommend is the skill of self-leadership.
Hmm.
We cannot lead others before we first get to know ourselves, who we are, what drives us, why we do what we do. The act of self-leadership puts us in the right strategic mindset where now we can lead others because we're not leading them from our own insecurities and fears. We're filling our own cup before we can fill the cups of others.
Mhm.
That's what I would recommend.
That's wonderful. So it's like the oxygen first, right? Take the oxygen
Exactly.
so that you can help
Put the
them.
oxygen mask on your own face before you put it on others, before you assist others.
What do you see is an essential skill, if you can think of one essential skill, to speak, sound, and look like a leader who has cultural intelligence?
The one thing I would say, I mean, if I can't say all, will just be more culturally intelligent, right? Easier said than done. One thing out of all of that is pause.
Ah,
Just pause. Don't react. When you feel that, and this is how I talk about it, usually our body reacts to it
Mhm.
first. And so it's different for different people, but sometimes it's the gut reaction that we have and you feel it. And sometimes for me, for example, that gut reaction heads straight to my face. My face gets
Mhm.
red, I
Mhm.
might blush or whatever it might be. But I know that my body is reacting. For some people, they
Mhm.
may sweat. For some, they just feel tenseness in their body. What I say then is anytime you feel the slightest bit of this, when you're having a conversation with someone, then pause. Don't say anything in the moment. Just think through and reflect on what's happening in your body. And within even 2 seconds, if you pause, you can react with a more culturally intelligent response.
Kristin, you have no idea how important that answer is to me because that's what I teach in my training.
Amazing.
Pause model. And the only thing I add is you pause and you also breathe. Now, Laurie, there's a question I ask all of my guests.
Yeah.
And that is because we're talking about speaking, sounding, and looking like a leader. What do you see as the essential skill to speak, sound, and look like a leader?
So I'm going to start with a trait. And I think the most important trait in general and for leaders is kindness. So how do we operationalize kindness? So I think first it's the facial expression, looking approachable. And there's many people who don't. So one of the things I think we do as coaches is we try to get people to sort of mirror us. We sort of bring out the best in people. And another way of showing kindness as a leader is how you run your meetings. Are you aware of including people and finding a way to safely include people? And then the third way would be having your one-on-ones or ways of getting to know the people who work for you. And not only is kindness nice and feels good hormonally and every other way to the people who work for you and to yourself, it also helps retention, morale, and productivity.
What do you think is an essential skill for somebody to speak, sound, and look like a leader?
Most essential skill, Lynda, for someone to act, speak, and sound like a leader is going to be somebody that can be actively based, listening, and understand people. A great leader can listen to understand, not listen to respond. So if you're listening and you want to be a great leader, be an active listener that listens to people and takes what they say, process it, try to understand it, try to comprehend it. And then what you need to do as a leader, apply your expertise, your knowledge to individuals' problem, issue, concern to rectify it. That's what a great leader does.